E mihi ana kia korua, Carlo and Tara. Tēnā koutou. He kowaio, ko makio roa ko whakapunake o ku maunga, ko waiawa roa ko te wairo ngā awa, ko Ngāti Rua roa ko Ngāti Moiwhare o ku hapu, ko Ngāti Kahununu ki te wairo roa ko te whakatohia o ku iwi. Ko te ana tuku ingoa. He Māori he Ngāti Tarara huki a hau. Indigenous knowledge is science. Our ancestors were navigators, educators, and stargazers, in tune and in sync with te taiao. When we introduce ourselves, we mihi to our whakapapa, our maunga, our awa, and our whenua, our iwi, our hapu, and our ancestors who came before us. Our layers of obligation go beyond ourselves. Our lineage pays homage to the lack of detachment from the natural environment. We are those that come before us, and our solutions must reflect the next generations that will come after us. We need action, not empathy. I grew up in rural Tairāwhiti at a time when I could predict the weather and know at most that we would have a couple of intense storms during the winter, with maybe a fallen tree at maximum. Now, I can't do that. We live in a time of freak storm flooding, which happened last week, and droughts throughout the summer. These extreme events happened within 6 months of each other. We've had the driest January in 122 years, and also the highest coastal water levels since 1975. Indigenous peoples make up only 5% of the world's total population, yet we protect over 80% of the world's biodiversity. Yet our current structures and systems of governance prevent us from doing this. To contextualise this whakaaro, up the coast in the mid-1800s, the government passed a couple of laws. First, there was the New Zealand Settlements Act, which enabled the government to confiscate land at will, and then they created the East Coast Title Investigation Act, which they created specifically for confiscating land which they had found oil in. Waipiro translates to alcohol or oil. To this day, Waipiro Bay carries this history. This is the context we sit in as Indigenous people, bearing the brunt of rapid climate events. There is an inherent connection between land confiscation to the exploration of oil, to the emergency evacuation of the whenua, which the people of the coast had to do just last week. We need reparation, not aid. We need solutions to this crisis that have not been used before. We need recognition that Aotearoa is a Pacific nation not immune to this crisis. Our systems of governance need to transform. We have the potential to be a leader. Aotearoa has explicitly agreed to be a leader in the reduction of greenhouse gases, and it is well time that we actioned that. Where my tipuna lay is slipping away, rivers are rising and banks are eroding. Where my great-grandmother rests needs to remain for the best. Down the road from my marae at Huramoa, 53 tipuna are at present being excavated due to river erosion. It is time we innovated and diversified our economy. Our short-term solutions must be accountability measures. It is time for a polluters pay principle. 50% of Aotearoa's emissions are created from the agricultural industry, which is inherently connected to the confiscation of land. The effluent from this industry should not hold influence. Tangata whenua are paying the price. These images up here, my marae Takatimu has planted native rako in an effort to mitigate our banks. Huramoa, they tried to plant trees, which isn't working, so they've now had to excavate 53 tipuna and they've been transported to 2 other local marae in the Wairohi. The words engagement, consultation and Indigenous knowledge without rights attached is not acceptable. Active, not performative partnership is the bare minimum. If you are in a relationship, for example, and one person is doing all of the cleaning, there is going to be it's going to get bitter very quickly. In a relationship, you don't leave all the work to one person. Right now, this is the system of governance we have. Our Resource Management Act is performative, especially in the current state. Cook's People tells us what happens when people choose to fight before they understand. The climate crisis tells us that policy created detached from the realities of the front lines is the same. We need a resourcing system based on a tikanga framework where environmental degradation is not an afterthought to profit and job creation. Governance is the key to flourishing. Our science does not work at your table. Indigenous governance paired with Indigenous science is what makes us flourish. Looking ahead, we need to ensure that decisions affecting Indigenous people are made by iwi, hapu and hokainga. We need to work towards a tricameral sphere of governance like the Mai Taki Mai project, a project led by Matua Moana Jackson and Margaret Mutu. Iwi and hapu are to be given adequate resources and upskilling capabilities to exercise their kaitiakitanga duty and create decisions and solutions for their respective rohe and iwi. The relational sphere acknowledges that Aotearoa has a diverse makeup which will require different forms of governance and an illustration of active partnership and decision making to ensure that the collective is looked after. Our future needs transformation. Indigenous methods of decision-making, like the wā, where kaumātua and rangatahi sit together and kōrero about the future to propose solutions, is a method we need to move towards. Climate justice is social justice. It is disabilities justice, and it is a human rights and Indigenous justice. Without it, we may not be here tomorrow. I am Indigenous, but I am not the only expert. Kai whawhau tonu mātou, the struggle without end. Mauri ora.
Tēnā koe, kia ora. I often say, as a young but right now old, wahine Māori, that I always get hoha because I'm like, there's a lot of breaths left and I've got to be doing this mahi forever, but I feel like I can retire now. And I feel very inspired, and I think there's lots of messages here that need to be heard and actually need to be listened to. When Te Ana was talking about our science does not work at your table. So Indigenous knowledge, Māori knowledge are not chocolate chips to be added to a cookie that's already been baked. So that's a mahi that everyone in this room needs to be doing, and the way you articulated that at the tuahine is like mean. So kia ora, homai te paki paki.
Kia ora.